original mission of Biosphere 2 was to see if we could sustain life on another planet. How they did that was they sealed people inside this building for 2 years. And those 8 people had to maintain this entire building themselves, but also grow all of their own food, harvest all their own food, and cook all their own food. So they had to do that in a couple ways. They had an agricultural area, they had tilapia and rice farms. So there was a lot of different ways that they grew food to sustain themselves. Now, in today's world, we're having to find more and more ways to grow food and come up with creative ways that take up less space and less land and less water. This unit is an example of one of those ways. This is called an aquaponics unit. The very top of this unit, in that top tank up there, there's about 20 koi fish. Those koi fish provide all of the nutrients for these plants living in this system. Their waste trickles down through these tiers, and that's what these plants grow off of. So it's a self-contained system. It's incredibly sustainable. It uses about 1/10 of the water of traditional farming. And you have protein from the fish and vegetables from the plants and the fruit as well. So we have things like this right here is a tomato next to me. We've got a lemon tree, some strawberries, and the water is being recycled through this entire system to maintain the growth of the plants and make sure they have the proper nutrients.
We're standing in the dining room and kitchen area that was used by people who were sealed inside in the early 1990s. This is where they prepared, cooked, and ate the food that they grew inside Biosphere 2. They grew a variety of fruits and vegetables. They decided after a while not to grow a whole lot of meat because of the inefficiency of the energy transfer from the plants to the meats. So they became hardworking vegetarians, growing their food inside this 2-hectare glass facility separated from the rest of the Earth, Biosphere 1.
So we are currently in our Mars lunar greenhouse. This is an experiment looking at how do we grow food on another planet. So the idea of these is that we would take something like this up into space, and probably about double the size of this, and that unit would sustain 1 astronaut. It would provide all of the water, oxygen, and half the nutrients for 1 astronaut. Some of the things that we're growing inside of this unit include tomatoes, cucumbers, strawberries, peppers, so some great additions to the other foods that will need to be brought up to space with us. Now, some things that have to be considered with these kind of units are things like lighting. Lighting is incredibly important because it needs to be augmented on another planet. We can't just rely on the natural lighting coming into that planet. The variation of light is so different. So we have to be able to augment it in a way like this, where we can install UV lights that provide the exact amount of light that these plants need to grow. The idea is that we could put something like this onto a space station, take it up into Mars, and deploy it off of the living quarters so that astronauts could have access to this food, water, and oxygen at all times. So this is just one example of how we could take food up into space. Now, the idea behind this is that there's these pockets in here, these white pockets, and there's nutrients running through these pockets with the water. The difference between a hydroponics unit like this and an aquaponics unit like we saw in Biosphere 2 is that we're adding the nutrients to the system. In the aquaponics unit, the fish are providing all of the nutrients for that system. So it's a great way to provide and grow food on another planet. So we are currently in the Biosphere 2 orchard. This is where a lot of the food production happened when those 8 people were sealed inside. In this area, they grew things like figs and citrus, such as lemons and limes and grapefruit. They also grew coffee in here. As one of the perks to living inside, they were able to have some coffee as well.
If the Biosphere 2 facility were to be built today, brand new, it would cost probably $1 billion. Back in the 1980s when it was being built, the idea was, how do you build a closed system of less than 2 hectares that could support 8 or more people almost indefinitely? So the first mission with 8 people inside lasted 2 years, and they were trying to make sure they produced enough food. They wanted to make sure that they were recycling and producing enough clean water, and they wanted to make sure that they were balancing their atmosphere, producing oxygen from photosynthesis of plants and algae, but also absorbing the carbon dioxide. Now, growing food, we know often there are pest challenges, and that was the same inside Biosphere 2. If you look at this fig leaf, it has mealybugs on the bottom. That white coloration on the bottom is mealybugs. And if you live in a 2-hectare facility, you don't want to use chemical pesticides that might be toxic or dangerous. So they had to figure out how to fight pests without using toxic chemicals. And if we're to sustain missions to other planets or other closed system opportunities, maybe research facilities in Antarctica, we have to figure out how to control these pests as well without a bunch of toxic chemicals.